I want to go over something that I'm noticing going on the web, and it's something I think that we consistently do as fans primarily, and it's understandable. I'm not here judging anybody, but I think it's kind of a conversation that I don't think it needs to die or anything like that, and I'm not saying anybody's unintelligent for bringing this up, but I mean, I just want to share my thoughts on it because I think we're making a mistake as a fan base to some degree, but also just as hockey fans. And if we continue to go down this cycle, you're going to always kind of find yourself either disappointed or jealous or maybe even upset. But there really is a lot more to it than that. Things are nuanced. And on the internet, we really don't like nuance, right? Primarily, we really like things either black or white. And the reality is most things are gray. And I want to talk about Cameron York and I want to talk about Cole Caufield. As a Philadelphia Flyer fan, if you go back to the draft when both of them were taken, it was a big controversy at the time because most Flyers fans thought that the Flyers wouldn't even have the opportunity to draft Cole Caufield. And then when the opportunity arose, the Flyers passed up on him. They passed up on Cole Caufield. And at the time, Caufield, I think, had 70 goals that year. An extremely impressive prospect. And even now, I mean, anybody who thinks that Cole Caufield is not an impressive prospect is crazy. I'm going to say that right now. He absolutely is. I want to go through the risk of him, right? The risk of him really is just his size. And not that he won't be a scorer. I mean, he's proving already. In 8 games, he has 3 goals in his entry level into the league, right? So it's already translating. He dominated the NCAA as well. I mean, this kid is very talented. Actually, if you look at that crop of players, I bring it up all the time, that U.S. program, the U.S. NTDP, I mean, they are extremely talented bunch. I mean, within there are just littered talent. I mean, everybody knows Trevor Zegras. Everybody knows the Hughes brothers, right? Everybody knows Joel Farabee now, who also is clearly much better than people anticipated. That program is dominated. The Flyers passed up on Cole Caufield for Cameron York. And in a lot of ways, Cameron York seems like the least sexy pick. And I understand that. And even at the time, if you watch the video I made 2 years ago, right after the Flyers drafted Cam York for Philly Sports Network, you saw, like, even I was slightly disappointed. Everybody wants the high flash goal scorer. We always want the high flash goal scorer. That's the one that sets up the highlights. But the reality is that Cameron York is a hell of a prospect in his own right. And just because he's not a goal scorer doesn't mean that the Flyers actually lost that decision. And that's kind of what I'm trying to say here, is that it's not really about comparing apples and oranges, and it's not about comparing the two players, because it's just comparing a decision, I guess. But at the time, the Flyers actually needed a defensive prospect more than a forward prospect. And if you look at the Flyers prospect pool, I mean, Cameron York, after being drafted, quickly rose to being the number 1 prospect in the group. I mean, you could have said Cole Caufield probably would have done that as well, or at least 1 or 2. But Cameron York would have been the best defensive prospect outside of Igor Zamula, who is kind of a late find, right? Like Phil Myers. So again, he comes with some caveats as well. Just like Myers is always going to be a little bit more of a project, right? There were some issues with his game, and even now we're kind of seeing it. There's some growing pains in the NHL, which should be expected. I'll make that clear, especially for defensemen. And that's something I want to point out to people, is that Cameron York is a very special player. And I don't think people really understand that. I brought this up over and over again. Again, he is 6 months younger than pretty much everybody in his age group. He played number 1 D-man on that historically good team. He was a pretty dominant player, and you watched as he led Team USA to a gold medal as captain, playing a defensive game against a historically talented Canada team. Now, we always like goals. Goals look good. They sound good. There's heroic moments in goals. Cameron York is also a heroic type of player in his own right. And I think it's a mistake to continuously compare these two players, saying, oh my God, why didn't we take Cole Caufield? Why did we end up taking York? I mean, York reminds me of Brian Leetch. I mean, would anybody regret finding Brian Leetch in this organization? Is that really the type of thing that we're supposed to complain about? That we didn't get the other awesome player that we want? I mean, I would have been happy with either decision at this point. I had to look into York a little bit more, but once I did, this is a fantastic hockey player who initially I projected, I think he was projected top 3 defenseman. I don't think that's the case. Now, I don't know if he's going to be a number 1 guy, but top pairing is definitely in his future. I mean, we see it. It might be more of a complimentary top pairing. I don't know if he's ever going to be putting up, 15, 20 goals in the NHL. I haven't seen it necessarily from his shot, but he's highly creative. He's highly poised. And I've been saying it for almost 24 months already that I thought he was going to make the team out of camp for the Flyers. I mean, I saw him at Dev Camp. He was clearly the most mature player there. Also being 6 months younger for his age group. I do want to point that out. The other guy who was that on that Team USA was Jack Hughes. You saw he struggled a little bit the NHL, and then now things have come full circle. And I mean, that kid is a future superstar. And everybody should be aware the Hughes brothers are awesome, and I'm sure that third Hughes brother probably will at least be an impact player. I don't know if he's going to be as good as his brothers, but, he's definitely going to make some kind of impact, right? So we look at Cameron York's game. I mean, what more can you want? What more really can you want? He's excelled at every level. He's excelled at the NCAA the same way Cole Caufield has. He got an ELC. He's already touched the AHL, dominated the AHL, and already made the NHL, and didn't look at a place at all in a season where he probably shouldn't be playing in the NHL if the Flyers were a better team this year. And what do you know? The Flyers' biggest problem right now seems to be defense, or maybe they need to get a little creative. Maybe they need to move a defenseman and maybe a couple of other assets to improve that D. All of a sudden, that becomes much more viable with somebody like Cam York in there, right? You might be losing Shane Gostisbehere to expansion, right? He's running your second power play, maybe even potentially your top power play next year, because the power play has been a mess. So I don't think anybody should be married to who's running that power play, who's quarterbacking at this point, because they're going to have to do something here. And Cameron York, it looks like a fantastic young player. I mean, he's poised. He can pass. He had a breakaway goal in the AHL. He could have had 2 goals. It was a nice deflection there by Forrester, who, again, a great pick by the Flyers, in my opinion. Underestimated pick. We'll probably see more of that as things move forward. But I don't think the Flyers made a mistake by drafting Cam York. That's really what I want to get across here. It's not a mistake pick. I get why people love Cole Caufield, and I think the mistake is going to be more people putting down each player, trying to compare the other one, whereas really these are 2 great players. That crop of players, if you can grab anybody from that program, you do it. Like John Beecher was taken at the end of the first round. I would have traded up to try to get him. That team seems to have an endless slew of guys who can be impact players at the NHL, some to superstar greatness level, and the others just damn good hockey players. Look at Joel Farabee. Did any of you think that Joel Farabee would be tied for leading the team in goals? Or I think he might be in the lead at this point. Again, he's ahead of schedule. He also looks like captain material. I've talked about. That's what these guys are. These guys are really special players, and that's kind of what I want to get across. You guys can do whatever you want. Honestly, I'm not upset with anybody. This isn't like me making a video trying to tell people to stop. I just noticed that, you're kind of ruining it for yourselves a little bit. Cameron York is an awesome pick. If Cole Caufield was taken right before him, nobody would be complaining at all. He's exceeded expectations as well. Cole Caufield has met expectations. York has exceeded them. And again, remember what I said, 6 months younger for his age group as a defenseman, not a forward, where it's harder to play. And yes, he doesn't skate like Quinn Hughes, right? He's still a damn good skater. He doesn't shoot like Quinn Hughes. He's not as dynamic as Quinn Hughes, but he's a damn good player, and he might even be the better defensively than Quinn Hughes. And you wonder how these guys develop over time. He's only 20 years old. He has, look at what Provorov came in here and did. Don't you see something similar here with York? And look how special Provorov. I know people don't want to think he is, which is crazy to me. Because if you look at somebody like Victor Hedman, that guy struggled to his 24. Chris Pronger struggled to his 24. Matt Niskanen moved around. Zdeno Chara traded. Majority of defensemen struggle in the early parts of their 20s. So when I see somebody like Travis Sanheim and Phil Myers struggling, yes, it's disappointing. Okay, but it's not out of nowhere. This isn't like they just lost talent. This isn't Space Jam. It's not like somebody came along and took the talent out of their bodies. This is a very difficult game to play. And the Flyers right now are in the toughest division in hockey, the most physical division in hockey as well, and they didn't come well prepared. It's just kind of the truth. But they will. These kids will learn. That's what they are. These are thoroughbred athletes. And people are saying they have no talent. It's absolutely crazy. There are plenty of fluctuations in the league that we see all the time. All the time. I would say more common to see a fluctuation than not. If you don't see a fluctuation at all, that means that's probably a generational player. The fact that you can see a guy like Connor McDavid doing what he does every season, regardless of whether his team is good or not, that is generational. Typically, even elite players, if their team suffers, they suffer. And Cole Caufield has 3 goals in 8 games. He's not a goal per game. I mean, again, I do believe he's going to be a star player. If I said any otherwise, I'm just being a hater. I mean, quite frankly, he's on his way to being a star player. At every league, he's excelled. There's no reason to believe he can't do it. Yes, he will struggle probably more in the NHL than the other levels because it's more physical, but he did really well in the NCAA, and that's a really nice test for a guy his size. He has everything, and he's physical, and he's not a pushover at that size either. You know, maybe he's not going to be a 60-goal scorer in the NHL. Maybe he'll be a 40-goal scorer, right? Maybe he'll just be a 30-goal scorer, but 30 goals at 70 points a year is still a damn good player, and in my opinion, he's probably going to be a little bit better than that, but his output will also fluctuate. I wouldn't be surprised if he blows, the doors off and then, has a season where maybe one year he hits 30 goals and then the next year he hits 25 goals. And then all of a sudden, boom, he hits 40 because he's in the right combination. Like, if you look at the Montreal Canadiens, they don't necessarily have the crop of players at this point that's going to excel to him being a 50-goal scorer. That could definitely change. I mean, they have young talent, but it's a team game. It really is a team game. And a guy like Cam York, again, a team game. I don't want him coming into the team next year, which in my opinion, he will make the team either out of camp or be in there very shortly afterwards, just like Joel Farabee, which is more difficult to do. The fact that he's in there and already doesn't seem out of place at all, that is more difficult to do than what a forward is doing. Like Ivan Provorov came in here and did that, and that's why we all turned our heads. And mind you, Ivan Provorov is the same age as Phil Myers, and look at Phil Myers' struggle. These things matter. Provorov still has room to grow and get better, and he will. Victor Hedman took time to get to the point he is today, and he's 6'6". Chris Pronger was traded. Like, these guys will struggle. Expect them to struggle. Don't expect it to be easy for them. It's not going to be. This is the toughest league in hockey. And a lot of them are kids, and you don't know what's going on in people's lives, too, and it does affect their games. And COVID did affect our team. It's not an excuse. Other teams had to deal with it. We deserve to suffer this year. We deserve it, right? The team didn't do well enough, but expect it to happen at times. And especially if a team is going through a rebuilding phase, like the Flyers are good and bad. It's not the same group every year. I'm sorry. I know everybody wants to try to paint that narrative. That's absolutely untrue. How many new players are on here over the past 5 years alone? Again, these are just painted narratives that people want to paint when things are bad. And you can do it when things are good, too. You can pretend like everything is rosy colored when things are good. Sure, we all fall into these patterns, but the reality is things are nuanced. Don't bash Cole Caufield because you love Cam York, and don't bash York because you love Cole Caufield. It doesn't make sense. One guy being great doesn't make the other guy terrible or mediocre. They can both be great in their own right, and I would actually say that is the case. The Flyers made a decision. They wanted the D-man instead of the forward. The forward to them was less valuable because they didn't really need that many forwards at the time. They have them. They have guys who can score. They have plenty of wingers. They have plenty of centers and wingers. They didn't have a potential top pairing defenseman in the system. Maybe that's York, or maybe that's Zamula, but it's most likely York. Zamula is great in his own right. He's going to have some problems, but he's also awesome. So you want these guys on the team. Right, you don't want to be top heavy. How many teams do we see in the league that have too much in one position? Again, I'm not putting down Cole Caufield. If we would have taken him, I would be extremely excited. I might not even know Cam York as well because of this. But I looked into York's game, and if you look in his game, it's pretty fantastic. The kid is extremely confident, very smooth, very poised, has all the skill in the world. If he can improve his shot a little bit, which I guarantee he will, he could end up being a number 1 defenseman for all we know. Who says he can't? Even Eric Desjardins was traded. He was the best defenseman that I saw on this team outside of Chris Pronger in the time really watching it. He was phenomenal. And he wasn't 6'4", he wasn't 6'5", he was a smooth skating 6'1" defenseman. He did it all. Smart. York has that in stride. And again, I think that entire program does. And that's kind of my point, is these are highly mature players. And it shows. It shows in their game. It's why Caufield can walk into the NHL and start scoring. It's why he can go into the NCAA and dominate. If you looked at Farabee, he also dominated the NCAA. These kids are special. That's my point. They both are special. Caufield and York are both special players. Don't get upset because one does well. You know, it's expected. Expect Cole Caufield to light up the NHL. Expect it. You know, don't be upset when it happens. Just know that Cam York is also a really good player. And quite frankly, going to play a huge role in this team. And if he's NHL ready this year, it allows the Flyers a little more diversity in the moves that they make. They shouldn't rely on Cam York to be the man next year. That's silly. But if you look at the lineup, they don't have to. They have other young stud defensemen, and I'm going to say it's stud defensemen, that are going through growing pains. This is why veteran matters. Everybody who listens to me knows that I hate the saying this is a young man's game. The only reason it's a young man's game is because of money, not because of poise and talent. Actually, I'd argue the salary cap is hurting our ability to keep talented veterans in this league, and they're going to other leagues because of it. It probably hurts the talent of our league because we can't afford to pay the players what they deserve. We have to let good players go to stay within the salary cap, which can be good. You know, you want to transfer, you want to bring young guys in. This team is it's at the end of a rebuild, and yet it still has more young talent in, right? Wade Allison came in. This is what's important. And again, anybody can do whatever they want, right? This is not me telling you what to think or who to like more. You know, you might always like Cole Caufield over York, but most likely York is going to be a great player, right? And it's not about apples and oranges. And I'm seeing it, you know, both sides, you know, like, oh, putting down York's ability or putting down Caufield's ability. It's not necessary because both are great players and both are developing in a fantastic route right now. And again, it is that program. It is a fantastic program, and I would keep drafting from that program, quite frankly. It's kind of kicking ass. And if you're a USA hockey fan or if you're from the United States, know that that is a reflection of where the game is going here internally in the United States. And Cam York, by the way, was captain of his team. You know, I said in the beginning, they won a defensive game. Shutdown guy against the best players. And he's a two-way player. It's not like a one-dimensional player here. Can you imagine if he grows a couple inches? He's still pretty young. He's only 2 inches. What if he grows another inch? He's obviously considerably larger physically, just filling out, than he was his draft year. He doesn't look at a place already in the NHL. And quite frankly, since he's been in the lineup, the Flyers actually been playing better D. I don't think it just has to do with that, but he is stable out there. He's going to replace a veteran, a younger veteran. He's going to make one of them expendable. I would argue he already has. And I would imagine the organization is kind of aware of that. I don't think they're going to assume that he can definitely be in there and put that on his weight. They don't want to do that. It's not necessary. They still have Zamula. They have other guys that can maybe swing in and out. But a guy like York is very important to this team. Just like a guy like Caufield is very important to Montreal. And they have young talent as well. But again, it's a collection of players. And that's it. That's all I want to say is, you know, it's Cole Caufield versus Cam York, but it's not. You know, I wanted that title because I wanted to attack the idea that they're versus each other when it's really not that. It's two great players developing on two different teams. You can be upset that the Flyers did one, but, you know, one of the most common one, and Kevin Fortier, a buddy of mine, he hates that we passed on the Brinkat. I get it. I get it. A great player in the NHL. You're upset that the Flyers passed up on him. But the Flyers also took, right after that, Carter Hart and Wade Allison. And yes, Pascal LeBurge seems to be a miss. But this is what happens. Smart hockey players make mistakes, or scouts make mistakes. Or, again, they're 18-year-old kids most of the time. They're not math problems. They're not math problems. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. And if you look at that draft, Moritz Seider was taken above Cam York, and maybe Cam York is just as good. Moritz Seider was built like a man already. We'll see what happens in the long term, but I don't doubt York. I don't doubt Caufield. And I would say just enjoy the ride. Instead of bashing one player and being jealous, it's apples and oranges here. It's apples and oranges, and enjoy the ride. You definitely got a good one in York, and Montreal definitely got a good one in Caufield. And there are plenty more players to draft. And as you see, Tyson Forrester lighting up the AHL right now. We might have a goal scorer in him as well, right? Maybe he's not going to be a potential 50 goal scorer like Caufield or a 40 goal scorer like Caufield, but maybe he's a 30 goal scorer. And then we got our top pairing defenseman, and all of a sudden, we can shift up Sanheim next year, or move or play York with Myers down the line, or play York with Provorov for all we know. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but the idea to have a balanced D, you need an entire lineup of good players to win. This whole idea that you need a goal scorer to win, it's not true. You need every line to be good. You need a fourth line that can play well. You need a third line that can shut down teams. You need a second line that can score. You need a first line that can score almost every night. You need a really good starting goaltender, and most likely a good backup to step up. And you need 6 defensemen. So if you have more than that, again, the playoffs, expansion, all this stuff, this is a tough ride, and injuries are part of it. Enjoy Cam York. He's definitely a special player. You're going to see more of that, and his first game wasn't a successful one by accident. And he's just getting started. So enjoy the ride.